What we're trying to do this evening is to clock with you as a community what our thoughts are on the response which we will be making to the planning applications, the revisions to the planning applications. As I said, I probably aim to do that in about half an hour and then go back onto questions, and if there's any further detail which we might elaborate. Next slide, please. Right. So to those of you who've already responded to the revisions to the application, an enormous thanks. Through our representations, the deadline has been extended to the 21st of January, partly also because the developer has produced some new computer-generated images of what the road through the middle of Pye Corner might look like. We'll come on to those later on. If you've already responded, you can still make further comments. It doesn't mean that your opportunity to make comments has been closed. So that's part of it. And as I said, we're your neighbourhood plan group, we're your community representatives, and I'm enormously grateful for the amount of work which the team who comprise the neighbourhood plan group do on this. We're not the council, we're not the developers, and we have very limited funds to help to do stuff. But we have got in amongst our number this evening, Urban Silence, who are our advisors on planning matters, and they work for us, and of course that means they work for you. Martina and Joanna, I think, are both there. They've done an enormous amount of work, particularly on the neighbourhood plan under Frank's leadership over the last month. So particularly important people there, but they're not. Urban Silence are here to this evening in a listening capacity and to help us shape our responses. Next slide, please. The plan for the evening is to give you an overview of what we want to achieve, remind you where we are in the planning process and the application revisions, talk about the key changes, and this is the sort of substance of it, and our proposed responses in, I think it's 8 different areas. Then go on to how to respond, what happens next, questions and discussions, and a wrap up. So moving on then to the next slide, please. Overview of what we want to achieve from this evening. There are, in fact, 5 applications which are live. One of them is the outline planning application for Village 7. So that's one which we'll come back to later on when they revise their applications. Places for People have, in fact, 4 applications, one of which is a listed building consent for a small bridge in Pye Corner, which they're changing. The substantive ones are for the outline planning application for Villages 1 to 6, and the 2 detailed applications for the roads. So that's the central crossing into Harlow and the new eastern crossing. And those are detailed applications, so they should be ready to deal with any questions you've got on that as part of detail. Talking of detail, you may have been aware that the applicants gave us, I think it was 3.5 gigabytes, which is a massive amount of data. And so what I'm hoping to do in this presentation is distill down the key points and where we can influence the process. What we cannot achieve on behalf of residents is 3 things. We can't do a response covering your specific circumstances. So if you've got a particular issue relating to your immediate neighbourhood, we can't take that on board and customise responses for people individually about that. We can only make comments as a community. We can't also go back to trying to win the battle which we lost when we fought the Gilston local plan allocation several years ago. We don't like it. It was never what we wanted, but it is there, so we have to respect that. And we have to, we're responding to the whole application and the changes which have now been made to that application. So the purpose is to let you know what we're doing and then invite your comments and questions and encourage you and your neighbours to individually comment, because it is important that councillors from East Hertfordshire do know that there's enough feeling and concern about these major applications to recognise that there's a lot of community interest in this. Next slide, please. So a reminder of where we are in the process and the application revisions. The applications were made by Places for People, the substantive landowner, for villages 1 to 6 about 18 months ago. Residents, the Neighbourhood Plan Group and East Herts Council responded, and revisions are made in response to those, the sort of dialogue which took place sort of a year, 18 months ago. The Village 7 application, that land is in a different ownership, was made about a year ago, and they are in the process of making revisions to their outline planning application, and that will be expected soon. It should have been at the beginning of January, but we assume it will be coming shortly, and we will let you know and communicate back with you on what those changes are. Having said that, both applicants don't own all the land they need to deliver their scheme, so they'll need to get statutory powers to acquire land. And in the case of Turlings, they want to take a little bit off the frontage of Turlings ownership, and I'm not quite sure what they want to do with it, but they're expecting to acquire some of it and reduce the area of communities space in the Turlings scheme in Pye Corner. The government has offered Hertfordshire County Council £172 million of funding to help advance fund the infrastructure which this development needs. And we have not been party to that, and we've not been allowed to see anything on that. The offer of the funding is not open for eternity. It needs to be committed, I think, by March 2025. And that means the road's built. So that puts pressure on our council to determine the planning applications, because there's a lot of work to be done after that if they want to take advantage of that £172 million worth of funding. As I said, we haven't been allowed to see the basis of why, as taxpayers, that funding has been made, despite us being directly affected by it. So meanwhile, there's a neighbourhood plan, which is an important document and which we're very grateful for the community's involvement, is being progressed, and we hope will become shortly a part of the formal planning policy for Gilston. And I can't emphasise enough the amount of work which Janine and Frank and Urban Silence team have put in on that on our collective behalves. So special applause for them there. Next slide, please. The key changes and our proposed areas for responses. So this is just a summary slide telling you about what I see as the big things, which I'm going to review with you now. The highways and transport, obviously a massive thing. We all know of the current problems. Industrial uses and the business park that East Herts want in conflict with their concept framework, in my view. Stewardship, whatever that means, I'll come back to that and expand on that later on. The developer contributions, these are things which developers need to pay for and to make their scheme work. And they've variously talked about offering £600 million, so that they're talking about doing quite a lot of that, but we need to work out what the real cost of what their plans are. There's a point which is in the policy of land value capture. There's a point about biodiversity net gain and the village buffers between the 7 villages being too narrow. Development height and form, so this is if they're producing villages, which is the concept. Should these villages be be more intense than the centre of Bishop Stortford, or should they be villages as we know them? There's a point which is putting in about travellers and show people, and there's a point that we are, whilst there are many things which we object to, there are some areas which are positive in what they're doing. So I'm now going to go into those details. The first one is highways, transport changes and emissions. The major changes, this is the Eastern crossing. So this is a crossing which the developers are proposing. The Garden Town Board are saying is essential for the wider needs of Harlow, and Essex seem to be very keen on it. Essentially, this is a road which connects from the Eastwick roundabout going east and connects over the floodplain and the River Stort and the rail and into Harlow's Templefields industrial area. And whilst it's not immediately a dual carriageway, it has been designed in terms of the foundations, etc., to become a dual carriageway in the future. From the Gilston and Pye Corner point of view, it goes through the middle of the existing community, separating out that. It will be helpful in terms of it will enable some traffic calming in Pye Corner, so that will be a positive impact from it. But it will take land from Turlings Park's public realm, and it will bring with it, we think, a lot of lorries. So they are talking about lorries which will be on their way, presumably to the industrial areas, or going on from those to the new junction 7A on the M11. So at the moment, the road through Pye Corner is subject to a weight restriction, but this road, as we understand it, will not be subject to any weight restrictions. And so we believe that it will attract a lot of heavy goods vehicles crossing Hertfordshire County Council's area, going on towards junction 7A of the M11. So we've always opposed it because we don't think it's needed by the scheme, and it cuts the community in half. They've changed the design of the access to make it a signalised junction into Pye Corner, and Pye Corner will become a cul-de-sac, and the road east Gilston Lane will continue up to the north for the interim. They've put in between Pye Corner, that's the bend by Turlings, and Eastwick roundabout, a new access into Village 1. So on that imaginary new road going east to Harlow, there is to be a new signalised junction where you can turn left if you're going east, up into what will be Village 1, and then the connection through to Village 2. They have built the scheme around the concept of making 60% of all journeys from the new developments to be journeys to be made by sustainable transport modes. That means walking, cycling, or bus. They are heavily reliant on the station as a major way of people getting into the wider area. But then on the other hand, they've made no station improvements. They have suggested that Harlow Station should have a northern access, but they have not got any agreement with Network Rail or Rail Track on that. And they haven't worked up any designs, and they don't own the land on which it needs to be built. They haven't, in my view, done any proper detailing of how walkers or cyclists or bus users from this area will get to the station and make improvements in that way. They are proposing change, well, the central crossing, which was the one which would be improved by putting in a public transport road going into Harlow, is the same as the basic design which they put forward 18 months ago. We think that the other bits of changes which are needed in consequence of their scheme is that the A414 status should be maintained as a trunk road going through Harlow rather than going through the community, but that looks like it's not what they intend in the long term. Burnt Mill Lane and Eastwick Road need redesign because you can't simply change them and the access into Turlings, because otherwise it might become a car park area for people who want to park their cars without paying for car parking at the station, and so get cluttered with that sort of traffic. So it needs to be redesigned. In my view, it should probably be redesigned and made into a 20-mile-an-hour home zone area to do that. Gilston Lane, they talked about closing, but after some strong feedback which we gave them, they're talking about keeping it open. They have a worry that it will become a rat run for people trying to leave the area and going to the north, and therefore it may, in the longer term, need to be closed, or some further works need to be done. So very big changes on the transport side, but we can come back, and I've got some further information which I can show you later on. Next slide, please. One of the things which oddly came out after the examination in public into the local plan allocation was that East Hertfordshire wanted to add some employment uses, 5 hectares of employment uses into the village, into the villages, and they saw it as a business park. We've always accepted the concept that the village centres will have employment uses. So it's not that we say that they should be residential mono uses. It's that we've recognised that there should be some employment uses within them, and uses which can sit comfortably in a residential neighbourhood. East Herts are still championing for a business park just to the west of Eastwick village with direct access off the A414, despite this not being in their original concept framework, so they're adding that in. The applicants, in fairness to them, believe that the villages should be villages and not having a separate sort of industrial area added to them. So there's a big debate about that. We will be trying to support that and making sure, and I've referred to Crinkly Tin, but I mean, what we don't want is to have villages in our neighbourhood where the frontage, which you will see from the 414, is of just an industrial estate with what you may be familiar with as the crinkly metal sheeting. So we think that's a bad idea, and hopefully we will be making representations in East Herts for review that. Next slide, please. Stewardship, alongside the development of probably 1,000 acres of housing, always the big offer by the developers from the outset was that they would transfer another 1,000 acres, particularly Eastwick Woods and the Hunsdon former airfield, into community ownership to be managed in perpetuity as open spaces. The buffers, which separate the 7 villages, also should be moved, in our view, into community ownership, because they need a triple lock to make sure that they remain as buffers between the villages, and that they're not just, the villages aren't joined up together and made into a single large urban settlement. Despite discussions with the developers, I'm afraid sadly to report to you that we've made little progress with them on how the stewardship of this land will work and be funded. We think it's important that the developers provide some funding so that doesn't become a charge on the community. Good long-term stewardship by us as a local community of this land is critical and a key part of the policy GA1 allocation made by East Hertfordshire. Next slide, please. Developers' contributions. This is under a section of the Planning Acts called Section 106, as you'll see. And essentially this means that the developers need to fund the facilities required by their proposals, rather than just leaving the costs of those to us or as council charge payers or taxpayers. This is achieved through these, what we call Section 106 agreements. we've been talking to East Herts about this, and much to our surprise, nothing has been agreed regarding the public transport provisions. So when do they have to put in the new roads to service their development? We've had much feedback, and we entirely agree and accept the point that the road transport network currently is inadequate to serve current needs. So simply adding more houses, you need to put in the new infrastructure before you start doing that. So we think that's important. Harlow station improvements I've already mentioned briefly. Funding for managing land transferred to the community, which I mentioned on the last slide. School provision, health facilities, social housing, etc., etc. None of those things, East Hart, or other than they've had some discussion with the developers about transport improvements, but all the rest we're told that they haven't discussed. It's absolutely key to the determination of the application, and we will be saying that the application we think cannot be decided without this information. Next slide, please. Land value capture. East Herts in their policy have made important statements about trapping the land value gain from releasing the greenbelt land and making land which was farmland, which was incapable of development, into residential building land. As you all will understand, this massively increases the value of the land. And the objective from original garden city, garden town ideas was that this increase in land value should be captured for the use of the community and providing facilities for the long-term needs of the developments which have been created. East Herts seem to be moving away from that and only asking the developers to pay for what's needed by their development. So we'll be making comments on that as well. That's a slightly technical point, but it's there, and we can come back and elaborate on that further if you want. Next slide, please. Biodiversity, 10% net gain, and village buffers. We live in a countryside setting. We all know it. We have barn owls, we have deer, we have other wildlife. The government target is that there should be a 10% net gain in biodiversity. So it shouldn't be a case that we lose some of these precious species, that the output of this development is that they should make it better for wildlife and improve it by 10%. Many of you will tell me that that's impossible to achieve because you're ripping up a lot of countryside to put housing on it. I hear that, but I'm just telling you what the developers are expected to achieve, and we don't know how they plan to achieve that. But you know, we need to ask them as to how they will do that. We've been promised some early wins, but nothing has yet been achieved or agreed with the developers. By early wins, I mean that, you know, if they are going to have an area of, say, for instance, around the Gilston War Memorial, which is going to be a park, then actually, you know, there's no reason why they can't start that early on. If they're going to create some woodland or some areas of suds or manage some other areas which will be kept as woodland, then it needs improvement, and they can make that investment now, and it would be cheaper for them and better for them to make that investment now rather than waiting. That's what we mean by early wins. Some of the early wins they seem to be waiting on because they would like to get more funding from the taxpayer to deliver it. That seems slightly bad news for the taxpayers. We've also made the point in our original representations that the buffers between the villages are too narrow, and they must be kept free of development forever with a triple lock mechanism. So there shouldn't be increasing or incremental uses put into these buffer strips between them. Next slide, please. Development height and form. We've been talking about, and the concept has always been 7 villages. These are 7 villages, not an urban extension to Harlow. We have been keen that villages should be mainly 2, possibly 3 stories in some places. In the centre of the villages, they may go slightly higher to 4 stories, but we've originally the suggestions that lots of this area should be 6 stories, which is higher than the centre of Bishop Stortford. So we're challenging that as to how to keep the concept of villages. We want to do that and make sure that the development height and form reflects those villages. The villages will, of course, be denser at the centre, where there's more things, and that may be housing for older people in some form of sheltered housing. So the question is, how high should the centres be? And as I say here, 4 or 6 stories.
For those who aren't familiar with the story,
we've got someone on. Can we?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's it revolves around a character we might all be familiar with.
Can we?
It's a grieving alcoholic at the end of his chapter.
Thank you.
Suffering from
next slide, please.
Control.
And enlists the help of a psychic medium.
Control.
Sorry. To see if
can
we can come up with an...
We got some. Okay, thank you. Travellers and show people. There's a lot of angst about this. It is the duty of East Harts Council to provide accommodation for travellers and show people across the district. One site has been allocated for this use to the north of Village 4 and one between villages 6 and 7. The development may need to provide some facilities, but they should be in proportion, we believe, to the rest of the East Hertfordshire district. The GA1 allocation should not be disproportionately used to house these communities. These communities have a right to housing, but they shouldn't be disproportionately located in this part of the district. They need to be in places where there's suitable road access, and they shouldn't be in the buffers between the villages, because the village buffers are meant to be there as buffers. And also some of these site allocations are made as potential reserve sites for in cases of need post 2033. So that's 13 years off, 12 years off. And we need to understand where the sites have been reserved for elsewhere in East Hertfordshire. Next slide, please. Well, those are the first 8 ones, which were the bits which we are the main areas of concern. On your behalf, we're not just grumblers. The applicants want approval for their strategic design guide and placemaking strategies. There's quite a lot within those strategies which we agree with them on, and as much of it matches what we put into our neighbourhood plan. So that's a good thing, and that's positive that we've got there, and we think we shaped that conversation on our behalf. And as I say, and as I mentioned earlier, the applicants are keen to talk to us about local stewardship and managing the land, but they haven't done enough work to make it happen. We're eager to get those early wins I talked about and establish a long-term framework for managing the land. Next slide, please. Right, how to respond. We, on your behalf, will draft what might be a short form response you might find helpful and post them on the website. So we will distill this down into a shorter form, maybe a single side letter, which you can download. And what we'll do that over the next week or so. So please check the website. We'll communicate out to you to let you know when we put that in there. We have just received some images for the new road cutting through Pye Corner, and we've raised questions on those. We can show you those if you want to take questions about those. We hope that you as residents will formally endorse the response we make on behalf of the community as a whole. And if you've got specific things which concern you about your local area and the development, now is the time to make representations on those. As a community group, we cannot deal with it on behalf of individual house owners and property owners, so we're doing that. We are, and it's important, advancing the neighbourhood plan, which is the one which you supported us on all the way through, and we had the presentations on September a year ago. We are getting that advanced, and we're working with that. And the next step will be the landscape master plan and Village 1 master plan. Next slide, please. What happens next is the East Herts Council are the decision maker, will review the revisions, review the responses from the community and others, and the officers will make a report to the council reviewing the application against national policies, the local plan policies, and our emerging neighbourhood plan policies. As I said before, the council have got themselves into a place where they're under pressure to approve the application, as delay could resist losing £170 million of government funding, but any approval is likely to be subject to conditions. That's any approval of the planning applications. We've yet to see the revisions for the Village 7 application, and some of you will have been on the call with the developer. They promised to respond to the questions they didn't answer in December, and as yet they haven't responded to those, and we're chasing them up on that. Your personal responses, even if you're just endorsing our representations, show evidence of community concern and engagement. This is really important. So there's to a degree a numbers point in here, and it's getting our message across. Next point. Questions and discussions. So can we resort to back to take the screen share off. Now, hopefully, hi.
I think,
hopefully,
Anthony, people are asking for a plan or some of the plans showing the roads and the layouts and the relationship to things like the Dusty Miller and where they are basically in the villages.
Okay.
Got those plans somewhere, haven't we?
We have. If we go back onto screen share, we will show you the plans which cover those pieces.
Just a moment.
Just loading, is it? You got
Frank,
it there.
can you put my screen back on share, or can I share it? One sec. Oh yeah, I've got the option here.
And we want to go to the front page of the Marquides presentation, please.
Okie dokie. Here we are. One sec.
Well, apologies for having to race through all of that. You'll appreciate there's quite a lot of stuff to talk about.
Anthony, can you hear me?
I can.
I want to say, first of all, a big thank you to yourself and to those in your team who've done so much work in such a professional manner with regard to the neighbourhood plan. And I hope everybody feels the same way. There are a few things that I would like to pick up on. One is I understand that you had a lot to say about Gilston Lane and whether or not it was open. And I heard on the grapevine that there was a webinar or something. I think my property is very much affected by that decision. And is there any way that I can have my input, as it seems to be missed out?
Well, that was a webinar which was organised by Places for People, so we weren't responsible for the broadcasting of that, although they did take efforts to make sure it's broadcasted. I think perhaps, Mary, if I could just put that, I'll come back to that. I've got Janine and Frank doing so. We'll deal with those more local issues. Can we just take people through this presentation and some work which we've had done? Because I think that will perhaps set some of the further detail on these important transport issues. So this is work which we've only just recently had. I think it came in on Friday evening last week. But sticking with the first point, you'll see that what we've got here is the A414 coming in on the left of the screen and going through to what we all know as the Eastwick roundabout, which is where it joins the red and yellow line going up and down the page. There is a roundabout there. And what they're proposing is this strategic transport corridor connecting into Harlow Centre, running into the scheme, and then picking up the various villages. And you'll see that it dives off to our left to a little blue blob in the countryside, which is Village 6. And the aim is that when Village 7 is developed, which is further, which places people don't own, that will be further to the left. So that's what the map is showing generally, but it also shows the changing road, and we'll come on and show you that, which connects into those yellow roads, which connects into the Temple Meads Industrial Estate. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is a plan which shows the detail of how it will connect into Burnt Mill Lane, which is the piece going off to the right, and Harlow Station. I'm going to pass on from that because that's getting into some fine detail on that, which I don't think is answering probably the question which I sent you after. Next slide, please. Okay, this is more information about the station and Burnt Mill Lane. Not that it's not important, but I think you wanted to get onto the design of the road junctions, which is the next slide, I think it is. So this is the current, shows the Crossing Inn's general point. So this is on the top drawing, you've got the blue line, which is the current alignment of the A414 trunk road, which comes in to where that central, that square box is, which is the Eastwick roundabout, goes south into Harlow and along Edinburgh Way, I think it is, to Temple Fields, and then will connect with junction 7A. You'll see that they are putting in, they don't call it a Harlow Northern Bypass, but they are putting in, running between the two parts of Turlings and in Pye Corner and Pye Corner itself, a new road which is designed so it will start out as 2 carriageways, but they're putting in the substructure to enable it to be made into a dual carriageway. That will run across the floodplains and will run through a new bridge over the Storts and into Harlow by the old gasometers by River Way. There's got some further detail on that. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. So this is a complicated one. So just pause. The big one slide in the middle of the screen is Eastwick Roundabout. The one to the right is a new junction which will be created off the road, going north into Village 1 and going to the east, that's our right as we look at the plan, to Turlings. I'll come back to that one in a moment. The roundabouts will be made into a signalised junction, and the traffic going north will only be cyclists, walkers and public transport. There is a bridge which you'll see cuts across the circle going south, which is a new pedestrian and cyclist bridge, which we have doubts about its efficiency, because we all know, living locally, that the prevailing wind comes from the southwest. And if you're 20 or 25 foot above a dual carriageway, you'll pick up an awful lot of wind on that, and that will be difficult for cyclists, mums with prams, walkers, etc., as you're very exposed to the wind there. So that's a decision which we need to do. The road south into Harlow will be widened with the creation of these public transport lanes in both directions, and will still be the single carriageway in each direction for other traffic. Moving back to that round on the right-hand side, this is the new junction to, as I said, if you're coming across the page to your right, then you can go into Village 1, or eventually it will go on and connect into River Way. To the bottom of that circle is a junction which will connect into the existing road by the Dusty Miller, and then go round into and only serve Turlings. So this is the piece of road. It's called Eastwick.
Sorry, Anthony, sorry. Because of the way the screen's set out, the individual pictures of our wonderful selves are right over the top of,
Well, that's
of the Eastern Crossing, so we can't see what you're talking about.
you have to move your pictures. You can do that. We can't do that. If you go onto view and play about with that, you'll be able to minimize the.
You should be able to pinch them in. If you're working on an iPad, you should be able to pinch them in and out a bit. But okay, moving on to the next slide, please. So this is more detail of this is the Eastwick roundabout as we know it now. So you'll see in more detail that there's coming in from the west, there is 4 lanes of traffic coming to a signalised junction, and going out back, there's 2 lanes of traffic. Coming from the east, coming in on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's 3 lanes of traffic and 2 lanes of traffic going out towards the Village 1 junction and the east into Harlow. Going north, you've got this 2-lane road, which is the road which will be public transport only. And you've got this bridge, which starts quite a long way up because it's got to get high to cross over the road. And then it's got this very long decline as it comes down into road level at the end. So they have put in a pedestrian crossing, so signalised crossings. So on all junctions, all arms of the crossing, you'll be able to cross what's called grade, which is at road level, and that will be pedestrian priority there. So that's that junction. Moving on to the next one. This is the this shows the greater detail. At the bottom of the page is where we've got Burt Mill Lane, the Dusty Miller, etc. You'll see that sweeping along the bottom, just below the orange line, is the existing alignment of Eastwick Road, which leads into Pye Corner and Turlings. And you'll see that they're going to make a new sweep on that, so that becomes in the first phase a T junction with all of the traffic, most of the traffic going off into Village 1 and Village 2 and the gyratory around the 6 villages, and a new access from Turlings onto that road. And I think the next slide shows that in its longer term format. Yes. So, right. This is the bit going further on. So this slide is showing you Turlings entrance at the bottom, the road going through between Turlings and Pye Corner, the traffic signalised 3-way junction at Pye Corner, which allows people into Pye Corner, and that will be, there won't be a through route out through the end of Pye Corner as there is at the moment going to High Wyche. And it shows the existing plans for a single carriageway in each direction. But please remember the point I made earlier on, that the road is being built and the substructures are being built to make that into a 4-lane road, so a dual carriageway. The existing route underneath by the listed Fiddler's Bridge, which is underneath that remains, but it's hidden underneath the bridge. And you'll see that they put a new walkway from Turlings across the Fiddler's Brook and into underneath what will be a new bridge. We've got, if you want, some early computer generated images showing what that bridge will look like. because we're very concerned of its impact on the community and how it will take out public space in the Turlings development. So next slide, please. So this is showing the Turlings Park access. The top picture is what they had originally proposed, which was a massive junction, and the Turlings being coming off the new junction, and very limited noise and pollution buffers. You'll see that I believe it's subject to a tree preservation order on the right hand side. That's the big pine is at the entrance to Turlings, and what they're now proposing is that the road goes straight past, and you'll see along the far side on the bottom picture is some sound attenuation things. So they planted some new trees, etc. But things like, and they don't show it on this thing, but things like this magnificent specimen oak tree, which I would guess is probably about a century old, they're going to cut that down. They don't own it yet, it's not theirs, but they plan to cut it down so they can put this road through the middle of our community. So you'll gather from that that I'm less than amused by that. Next slide. Okay, these are just some images of how the traffic, and whether once Pye Corner has the traffic taken out of it, then we think that they should review. We don't need chevrons in it. We don't need some of the heavy engineering of safety barriers. It will be a different place. And again, we need to make sure that, that it's not used as a free car park for the station. Next slide. Okay, I think right. Does that, can we go back to this part of shut the screen share just for the moment? Did that provide you with enough of an overview of what is being proposed? I'm sorry, there's just massive amounts of detail. I'm aware that I'm talking at you rather than listening to your questions, so apologies for that. Frank, what are we doing on the questions?
A couple of questions from people in residents in High Wyche who are asking if I can summarise how they can get involved, and secondly a fairly detailed question about the site there, the Gypsy Traveller site there, from Will Wentworth, who had a longer version of that, if he wants to elaborate on that.
Okay, let's deal with the first bit. We are a community group. We welcome people from the community in the broader sense to help and engage with us. So that's absolutely where we are at. Our website, everything which we do is published on our website. So please watch the website, get engaged with that. If you have particular skills or particular passion or whatever on some of these planning issues, then do talk to us about if you'd like to join the neighbourhood plan group and help us. There is also a need to get volunteers engaged in the landscape master planning exercise, which is about to start. So that's another route. We think that from a High Wyche perspective, that, I mean, it's obviously for people in High Wyche to reach a view about it, but the new road infrastructure, you'll have to reach a view about whether that will encourage people through High Wyche to use the new road infrastructure and as a different way into Harlow, or to the Junction 7A, or from Junction 7A into High Wyche, or maybe into Sawbridgeworth if the London roads congest. This is probably the direct image questions. I don't think there's any proposal to improve cycling from High Wyche to get to the station or other facilities, and I don't know that I haven't heard of any improvements to bus services connecting from Sawbridgeworth, High Wyche into the development. On the subject, there's a question you say on detail on the access to the northern travellers and show people site.
A couple of questions about travellers and why they sited there, and is it unfair? It's extending the development area into High Wyche, and comments that they could be placed elsewhere in Harlow perhaps, or Epping.
Well, I think there's two bits, it seems to me, which is but firstly, the amount of affordable housing in the development is quite large at 40%, which is what the applicants propose to provide. So there'll be a lot of affordable housing which will be made available anyway in the development. In terms of more specific housing, and I do appreciate it's a different type of housing which is needed for travelling people and show people, but that should not be, in my view, in the buffers. The buffers should be buffers, which is what it says on the can, and that we shouldn't be having this sort of type of development between villages 6 and villages 7, which I believe is what the owners of the village 7 site are wanting to provide. The one to the north obviously has difficulties in the sense that if you're trying to get a lorry with show people's equipment or whatever on through, the country lanes are simply unsuitable for all of that. Some provision is as a holding provision for needs which may arise post 2033. But what our concern is that by allocating this land now, and saying this is a holding provision, it certainly becomes a reality rather than waiting to see what is the need in 2033 and across the district council where are the best places to meet that need. It shouldn't be that this is just a gratis site and everything's put on to the Gilston project. But I guess that as a community, we have to respond on the entirety of the issues we face, and show people as but one of the issues.
Number of questions. Sorry, can I just, there's a number of questions. Sorry to interrupt you. There's a number of questions from Turling's residents, I assume, who don't fully see how they're going to be getting in and out to go to the schools or to go to the shops, and what prospects there are of, even if they do understand it, changing it, of getting the present designs that we've briefly shown everybody changed as part of the planning process.
Would it help, and can we have a community action of waving your hands or giving the thumbs up if you think it will help, to go back to the images which we talk about, which we've got from our consultants, and then would like me to talk you through.
Can I, just before you do that, because there have been questions, to try and share a screen showing where all these villages will be, because I think not everybody knows what village 1 is, or 2 or 4. And I think I can do that.
All right, well, excellent.
By showing you here a sort of overlay map, which is of the area. There's Eastwick and the church there. There's the 414. You can see my pointer, can't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Excellent.
There's the 414 going up to Hunsdon, St Dunstan's Church, and Hunsdon there. So you get the idea of where you are. Turling's is there, and then you see village 1 is this area, basically the Eastwick roundabout there, so it'll be either side of that. And then the planned village,
it'll be to the north of the Eastwick roundabout,
yeah,
and it goes up to what's called the Chase, which is that bit of green space just north of where your pointer is. It leaves the area fronting Gilston Park open, so the setting of Gilston Park as a 19th century mansion house is preserved, although it will have sports field uses on part of it.
And then, then you see village 2 to the northeast.
Yeah.
And then 3 up here and 4 up in the north. This is a bit.
Frank, sorry to stop. Frank,
Yeah.
Frank, sorry to stop you, but we've had a comment here that it's got the incorrect development area marked onto it. And I don't understand that, but...
No, this is the correct. This is
Yeah.
the neighbourhood plan area.
Yeah.
The development area is slightly bigger because parts of the development area are in High Wyche area, not in our neighbourhood area. It's a plan I'm using from our neighbourhood plan. It's a map I'm using from our neighbourhood plan. So the development area is a bit bigger.
I think it is that northern area.
That is part of the development area, but it's not in our neighbourhood area. So that's right. But you can see that that's the rest of Village 4. It's also where one of the traveller sites will be. And then you move, that's Village 4, which is fairly big, St Mary's Church there. And then Village 5 down here, above Eastwick. And Village 6 along the 414 west of Eastwick. And finally Village 7, which is not part of this present application, but straddles Church Lane and its junction there with the 414. And that's just to give the overall perspective. There are a couple of questions about that. So
Frank, can you go back to your pointer and go to Eastwick roundabout?
Yeah.
And then this is showing the original alignment of the road. The road goes slightly north of, just take your pointer, it goes slightly north of that. Now it branches off to the north. Yep, goes precisely where you've got it. And then it turns, it goes through and cuts off where number 10 is, just slightly higher off. Yep. And connects out into, further over to that roundabout on, So it goes across the floodplain there.
Down to there.
So resident Turlings will still be out, probably in an easier way, because it will be a signalised junction onto that new road. And the road, the last part of the road should be, if we ask for it, I hope it will be traffic calmed. So it will be possibly a 20-mile-an-hour home speed zone. It will have some cycleways, I hope, alongside it, part of it, so as to reduce the impact of people trying to use it as a free car park for the station. The access to the station via Burnt Mill Lane, which should have been improved by the Turlings development, but the developers haven't yet carried out the works they're meant to have carried out. But that should be improved, and we're trying to seek to get the developers to spend money on making that work better as a pedestrian and cycle route to the station. And that is also where the new northern access to the station is meant to be being created. So the residents of Turlings will have either going underneath the bridge, which is being built over Fiddler's Brook for this new road, or by the traffic lights going over the bridge into Pie Corner and the Plume of Feathers, etc., and the green space, which will be open to the public as they go up, or they take exercise and walk to the north. So connections to the station should be improved, and I hope that the junction between Turlings and the rather sort of racy road at the moment will be improved, but that's to be argued for. We got a positive response on that? I hope that gives people some of the stuff. It's very difficult because, I mean, it's great that we've got so many people. I think we've got 62 people on the line, and many of you sharing a screen. So we've probably got more than 60 odd people on.
One general point, Anthony.
Yes.
It's on the question of permeability in general. As quite a lot of visitors on a slope and heading down to a floodplain, would it be possible to make sure that proportion of the land which becomes private land, such as gardens and drives, are contracted to be permeable? Yes,
sorry, I thought you meant permeability in walking rather than permeability in porosity. There's absolutely a point that in any development like this now, and we can see this in Turlings as a case in point, that the runoff from a flash flood or a heavy rainfall, if it hits all these hard surfaces, it just creates a massive flood of water, which can't be coped with. So the aim is, and you can see this in the entrance to Turning, is to have things called sustainable urban drainage systems, which trap the water and allow it to slowly leave these ponds. And outside Eastwick, for instance, there will be a big, what they call sud farm, which is a big area where the rainwater runoff from hard surfaces, the roofs, the roads, the car parking, etc., will all be channeled into those areas so it can slowly attenuate the flow and release the water over a period of days rather than a massive flash flood. So yes, that's deeply involved and ingrained into, I think, any new development now. And because they don't want to create that flash flooding, and that's all part of good modern design and how you build these sorts of developments. But yeah, absolutely, it's a live point. Does that answer your question, Mary?
I really rather meant if somebody buys a house and they have a garden and they have a drive and all of a sudden they decide to concrete the lot, could it be part of their contract or their freehold agreement that they are only allowed to, that they have to make a certain proportion of their outside land porous?
Well, it's difficult to design for the developers and their subsequent purchase and what they might do with their houses in 10 years' time. I think the part of this will be different in the sense that if they get to achieve what they have said they are going to achieve, which is that 60% of all movements are not by car, but by bicycle, walking or bus, there'll be a much lower level of car ownership, and car ownership will probably be in car parking areas discreetly away from the houses, because they aim not to have the streets dominated by cars. So the villages will be quite intense areas, and I don't think that they may have, those drives will probably have brick pavers, but you can still have brick pavers with the water draining through them.
Thank you.
Do put that in as a representation to the...
There was a question about, there's a question about, is access to Village 6 through Eastwick Village, which I think I can answer and say no. There'll be a separate access road planned off the 414 into Village 6. But if Village 7 comes on stream and has its access at the Church Lane junction, they'll close down, as it were, the Village 6 one, not build the Village 6 one, and use. But
they will
have an access, they say, if they're going to build an industrial unit there, or an employment sector on the green slopes overlooking the Stork Valley, which is something we will oppose.
So Frank's absolutely right on that. One of the points is that if they build this industrial business park fronting the A414 to the west of Eastwick, so between Church Lane and the Eastwick turn-off from the A414, they will be having to build a new signalised junction on that piece of road. So we'll end up with 5 signalised junctions, I think it is, between Church Lane and the new road crossing. This then provides an opportunity, we think, but no one's talked about this yet, for them to look at the whole nature of the A414 from Church Lane to the Eastern Crossing, because it shouldn't be with an unrestricted speed zone, because they want to create a new pedestrian and cycle route, for instance, from Eastwick to Hunsdon Mill. And if you're crossing the A414, we all know that people have been killed on that piece of road. And so we know that that's reality. It needs to be made safer. And especially if we've got a range of pedestrians and cyclists crossing the road, you can't be expected to cross it pushing a bike or cycling with cars coming at you at 70 miles an hour to at the moment.
Couple of
Where we
questions.
are.
Couple of questions about public rights of way. What's going to happen to that? I'll summarise this or generalise it a bit. What's going to happen to public rights of way? Will they be protected? I think is the underlying question. And a specific question concerning Gilston Park House, which I didn't fully understand. I think the point was that there's a footpath there now, but if there's another X thousand people, will they be using that and walking past the front gardens and front doors of the people who live there?
Yeah, no, we've had that before. It's a very good question. The public rights of way network, which we have at the moment, is a network built up over centuries by common use by people, and they become formalized through a rights of way network and a rights of way plan. The network is designed around the rural needs, and we have been arguing with, or making the point to the developers and the planning authorities that there needs to be a review of some of these rights of way, because whilst they're long established rights of way and can't lightly be adjusted, it's totally wrong, in my view, for the developers to bring 30,000 people into this area and expect existing rights of way to cope with them. It may be that they need to design different rights of way across their land so they can cope with the walking and cycling, rather than just assuming, because I can entirely understand the point from Gilston House that the rights of way runs past the house, and that therefore if this suddenly becomes a major walking route in a town of 30 or in villages with 30,000 people living in them, they're going to have very much more pedestrian traffic. So we're attuned to that, but I mean, it's an excellent point if you want to make it, if you're a resident there, and make it to the planning authority. Martina.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that we recognize this issue and is not included. The network of public rights of way is not part of this submission, will be part of a future submission, the landscape master plan.
Sorry, can you just introduce yourself to everybody, because they may be less familiar with who you are?
Yes, sorry, I am Martina Jvar. I've been working with Anthony from Urban Silence. So I've been working with Anthony and Frank, supporting the development, supporting the community on the technical side of planning, and particularly with the neighborhood plan over the past few months.
So Mark, there's the neighbourhood plan. You will remember that we circulated to you what we sent. This was the document which is on the website, but we circulated it to every household in the parish, which is the formal responses we made to the patrons when they first came out. So Martina and her colleague Joanna have helped us enormously on those. Yes, it's a professional job, but they've helped us enormously, and they put in hours and hours of time on the community's behalf. So thank you for what you've done for us on that, Martina.
I didn't intervene to say that. What I wanted to say is that in the neighborhood plan, we have a specific policy to address this issue of the rights of way very close to houses. And this was because some of you said it before, that some of the rights of way, particularly in the Gilston Park area, are very, very close to the houses. And at the moment, because there are not many people, it's all fine, but it wouldn't be in future. So there is a policy in the neighborhood plan, and therefore that will apply when the strategic landscape master plan will be presented and approved, of course, if the neighborhood plan is approved. And therefore there will be something to protect has already been put in place. That was what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I think if I can follow up, sorry, Anthony, but there's been a follow-up question in terms of, well, how do we let the local authority know of the concerns? And I think this is all about individual responses
Right.
to the application. So at some stage before we finish, I think it'd be quite helpful if you could just remind people how, they make their own individual responses as well.
So, well, let's deal with that now. In case I were to forget it later on, we will put on our website a sort of draft letter which deals with some of the points generically, and we'll give you in that draft letter the references for the 4 planning applications which Places for People have made. I don't think many people want to comment on the listed building application for the Fiddler's Brook Bridge, but I haven't heard it as being an issue, but that will be one of them. Then there's the 2 formal road applications, and a reminder, those are for detailed consent. So what they put on the plans, they expect to be able to get a consent for those things. And if East Harts give them that consent, they, from a planning point of view, can build it. They don't own the land for most of it, so they'll have to buy the land. But that's a separate point. They'll have got planning consent to enable them to do this. Then the other one, which is the big application, is the outline planning application for 8,500 homes in 6 villages. And so and where those bite on your personal circumstances, then you absolutely have a duty, opportunity to make those representations to East Harts and make them realise that you've got a concern. And if it's a concern about how it impacts on you, or the concern which we had earlier on about how the future of this would be working, should there be solar energy, how will they achieve the net zero carbon impact or the biodiversity gains. As I said, we know we have barn owls in the neighbourhood. We've worked very hard over the years to encourage them, and will they be lost by making this development?
A good question that'd be music to your ears is, do we need to have a fundraising exercise in order to continue the work of the Neighbourhood Planning Group?
Yes, well, the pressure which we face, and I and the Neighbourhood Plan Group face, is that obviously with all this information and all this stuff which we're talking about, and it's been a very technical presentation for which I again apologise, it takes us an awful lot of time to do that. And therefore our focus at the moment is on getting the responses back to these things and representing the community to the chair of the leader of East Harts, representing the community to our local MP, to the chair of the Harlow Garden Town Board, to Homes England, to all sorts of other people who we think we can help influence and say, look, we're rational people, we've got rational points, these points haven't been properly considered, the work hasn't been done, etc., etc. So we're making those. We've been, and it's only fair to remind people that Places for People did give us as a community a significant amount of money to help us make representations and work with them on some of the scheme. We have got through most of that money because this working with consultants, we have to pay them for their time, and getting detailed traffic assessments, etc., is costly. So yes, we do need some more funding. Anybody who's got or would like to run a fundraising thing, or even send a check. We don't. None of us as community volunteers get paid anything for what we're doing. We do pay for our administration because that's a task which is separate, and then we keep an eagle eye on that. But yes, the neighbourhood plan has taken a lot of time and effort, and you'll remember, or I could go and reach from just outside at arm's reach over there, a copy of the neighbourhood plan. And it was interesting because there's a printed document this our MP had on the table when she met the Secretary of State for Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. But yes, we would welcome any donations, and we will thank you very gratefully for any contributions which people might like to make.
The question about, thank you, Anthony, the question about Village 7, what's the prospect of the development of Village 7 can be integrated into the development of 1 to 6? rather than being a standalone development rushed ahead of its time.
We've made a point all the way, a very good question, thank you for that. We've made the point that the allocation in the district plan is for 7 villages, not 6+1. So the consents need to be structured about the basis that it's for a 7-village development, and the fact that the 2 landowners can't work seamlessly together is a problem which they have, and it shouldn't become a problem for the community or a damage to the scheme. There are differences in how they're structuring the development of Village 7, not least which because they want to divert Church Lane through the middle of it, which seems we need to understand that better. But secondly, they have shown a indicative form of development, which is very much of it's like a traditional housing estate built in the 1970s is my assessment of it, and it's slightly surprising that they're trying to do that or use those sorts of images when certainly places for people have a much more sensitive approach to how they're thinking of planning the actual houses which they built.
That's probably exhausted the ones I've got on chat, but I'm sorry if I've missed any. So if individual people would like to just unmute themselves and ask personally a question that I've missed or that they'd like to add now.
Yeah, Frank. Yeah, Frank, before other people, I mean, there was another question, which is related to you. It was explained why the boundary of the neighbourhood plan is different to the development boundary, but there has been a question, you know, as the northern boundary has now been moved to include parts of High Wyche, are we able to be included in the neighbourhood plan?
Yeah, I answered that one direct to the person who.
Sorry, all right, okay. Right.
But I'm afraid the answer is no, because the neighbourhood plan has to follow parish boundaries. It can't go outside. The Gilston plan can't go outside into the parish of High Wyche. The High Wyche, of course, can make its own neighbourhood plan or support ours.
Frank, can I ask you directly then, as a person whose boundary is on that part of Village 4, the new north boundary, I can't understand why we can't be part of this as a community. Now it directly affects us.
I think sorry, my reply was more about the neighbourhood plan that you asked for, which is the specific plan we're doing. There's absolutely nothing to stop every resident and the parish council of High Wyche making their representations to East Herts about what they think is wrong and shouldn't go ahead on this application for the villages, including Village 4 in High Wyche.
We're all part of the same community being affected by the same development. And I think that we must be stronger together than separately coming in a smaller group.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what we're trying to do, the purpose of today is to tell you, my central purpose is to tell you what we're proposing, the nature of how we're proposing to respond to these revisions to the planning application, tell you what we're wanting to say to people, and listen to you as our community to understand and get your support and your thoughts and comments, so we can be better informed in that. And it's great to know that we've got 70 odd people on the call this evening as we tell you what we're doing. So that's good. But there is a point, I think, that it's a numbers game as to we do want to get as many possible representations into East Herts, and so that our councillors can know that there's a lot of feeling about this. It's not just the neighbourhood plan groups working in isolation, and it's just a few people who've got a real buzz in their mind. There's a lot of feeling across the community about what needs to be done. Absolutely. As I said at the outset, we can't reverse the local plan decision because that was a decision which has been made. It's been endorsed by ministers and the council. So we have to work with, it's not that we like the development and want it to happen, last thing we want, but it's going to come, and we need to make sure when it comes in the best way possible, and that the proper needs of the communities are looked after and respected.
Absolutely, but we have a community now that is now properly aware of what is happening. We have about 40 members in High Wyche at the moment, and we want to be able to contribute to your cause and our cause in a productive manner. And it seems that when it goes to presentation to council, it will be a lot stronger if we could give you our findings that we've been going into in great depth as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But we welcome that, and it's great that you're on the call this evening. If you've got professional planning expertise which can help us do this stuff, then that would be helpful. Doing that, we have to get our responses in within the next 10 days. So time is running short, and we need to make sure that we do that. Martina, you're waving your hand, reminding me I've missed some important point.
I just wanted to say that for the response to the planning application, there is your group, Kirsten, can join the neighborhood plan group, as Anthony just said. You know, if you all the points can be put together. A point that you can also, because it's not possible to change the neighborhood plan and extend it. I understand it's crazy that, you know, a little part of it is not included and is not covered by the neighborhood plan once the neighborhood plan is approved. But you could also separately make a point that in the future for the detail of the development, you would like the neighborhood plan policies to be extended to that northern part of the site and press the local authority to consider the northern part of the site having the same criteria and being covered by the same policies of the neighborhood plan. I think that would be rational, and it would be a good point to make, although formally the boundary of the neighborhood plan needs to follow the parish boundary.
Okay, thank you.
For sure at this stage.
And remember that when Jenny Pearce, who's the officer in East Herts who's leading on villages 1 to 6, she made it absolutely clear on the webinar call, which East Herts ran, that she was going to be assessing the application against national policy, against the local plan policy, and against the neighbourhood plan. So she's working on having it assessed against all 3 bits. So it's not like you know, she will be seeing the neighbourhood plan and the villages 1 to 7 as an integrated part of the development and be looking at it in that context. So I don't think she'll say, gosh, this stops at High Wyche, they can do what they want. It will be carrying on, and she'll be likely to interpreting it. But any support that you can give us to make sure that our neighbourhood plan gets through and gets endorsed and voted on, you won't be getting a vote in High Wyche, but we need to get the vote out when it comes to doing the referendum on it. Other points?
Okay.
I have one question, sorry. In terms of the road that will effectively divide Turnings and Pye Corner, is that that's going ahead as planned, and there's little opportunity to change or influence that now? Is that the case?
No. This is a planning proposal which they are trying to seek consent for that road. Nothing has been decided, but I think it's fair to say that whilst nothing has been decided, it's a better scheme than the original scheme which they came up with. I have enormous doubts that the computer-generated images, which we will publish on our website over the next day or two, interestingly show you the impacts of a transit van going through. We know that the road has been designed to cope with the highest lorries that can use the network, and if it's connecting to a thing called the M11 motorway and the Temple Meads industrial estate, I think we can say that there's a reasonable likelihood that a lot of lorries will use that road. So why they've done visual images only showing a transit van going over the bridge, I don't think it's quite what I would recall as a fair interpretation. But, you know, we will ask them that question. We have already asked them that question. And we've also asked them why they think it's right to cut down a 100-year-old tree because of their development ambitions, but especially because it's a specimen oak tree. We're getting Roger.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm not sure if I missed it at the beginning of the presentation, but I've noted that the presentation or the webinar is being recorded. Is that going to be? Is it going to be available on the website? It's just that a couple of people we know haven't been able to join, and they wanted to know if they can view it at another opportunity. Is that the case or not?
Yes. Yeah, that's the plan. Is that we will be hosting it. I'll upload it to a YouTube channel to make it available to people.
And
okay.
The other point about that, Roger, is that we will put the slides on the website, but we will take out of them at this stage because we're yet to just we've yet to go through the advice from our professional highways consultant, partly because we don't want to have that turned around and used against us if there's some sensitivities within what they've said. So we need to do that. So I would hate to give the work which we've commissioned and paid for to the developers at this stage.
Okay, understood.
If you understand my general point on that.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? We're getting to the witching hour of 8:30. I know that some of the people on the call have got to leave.
We've got a hand up from it says Billy. So
Billy.
Yes, it's me, Kirsty, masquerading as Billy. Never mind. Long story. Just in response as well to the can we influence the road? When the directors from Turlings Park met with Places for People before Christmas, one of the interesting points that came out of that session that I don't think that we should lose as a group was that in relation to the rail network, the station and improvements on that, they appeared to be factoring in the impact of COVID onto home working and what that might do for demand to services, rail services, etc. However, they did not appear to have applied the same logic to the road network. And I think that is a point that we should try and bring out in all of our responses if possible. I think I referenced that in the leaflet that went round to all the Turlings Park residents, and we can share that on the website if it is useful to residents from other neighbourhoods. Obviously, Turlings has its own set of issues that we need to deal with as a community, which is why we did that. But I just thought it was worth making that point around the fact that they've got two different ways that they're looking at things at the moment from what we could tell and what they said on that evening.
There's been asked a question, not that I've gone through the questions I've been asked, but I've been asked a question of, do I know why the tree close to the woodyard appears to have been burnt down and left as a sort of stalk in the ground up to 30 foot high? I don't know the answer to that. I believe it's been damaged, and so I don't think that tree is going to grow ever again, so that one will come down. But the tree I'm concerned about is what I think is a beautiful specimen oak tree within the Turlings boundary, which they want to acquire and simply cut it down. And that to me is a shame, and that needs to be subject to longer and better debate about why a 100-year-old tree as one of the bits of our local heritage and landscape should be cut down. Right, we've got
There's a couple of questions. Is there any further news on the the new Harlow Hospital on the Gilston site, which you probably deal with quite quickly?
No, there's that we are told is going to Junction 7A. So or either that or will stay as a refurb on the Princess Alexandra site.
I see Bob's got a question.
The other question?
Yeah. Sorry, is that me?
James.
Yeah, sorry, yes, it's actually Lucy, but you can call me James, Anthony. With regard to the oak tree, Anthony, I have made contact with a gentleman who gave us the tree protection order at the front of Turlings. It was tortuous, but I finally got that done. However, with regard to the oak tree, I've asked for advice on that. The last conversation I had with the gentleman was regarding that Turlings was a private development and that he didn't really want to get involved. But I will press on that and get back to you when I can.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. I mean, my point is that the tree is at risk because the developers are making a planning application covering the area, and their proposal is to cut it down. So therefore, you know, it's something which any more we can do, and your help in doing that is enormously appreciated. Mike.
Mute, but you're mute.
There we go. Is anybody good at making bat boxes? Get that up in the oak tree quickly, I'd suggest.
We can probably resolve that one for you.
Bob?
Yeah, just to say that the detailed planning application for the Eastern Crossing is not going to be the end of the story, because as Anthony said before, the developers don't own the land for it. So they either have to go and negotiate ownership, which will cost them an arm and a leg, or they apply East Herts Council to compulsory purchase it. And if there's a compulsory purchase order, there will be further opportunities to object and force a public inquiry.
And I think it's fair to say that it still may cost them an arm and a leg, but maybe not 2 arms and 2 legs, but it'll still be compulsory purchase order doesn't mean it comes for free. And so there'll be a lot of costs to be looked at there.
There are, in fact, over 40 landowners associated with the building of the new road in which they need to negotiate. It is a substantial number, and it will take time.
Okay. We said we should about 8:30. It's now just past that. Can I thank you all for your attention and spending the time listening to that? Again, I'm sorry that I didn't have more exciting visual illustrations to show you, but we had to try and get it through quite a lot of the technical stuff. So thank you very much for your time and joining us.
Sorry, there have been questions about the road. So what I think we can do, Maya and I will look at the maps and things, and because I mean you mentioned how much information there is on these applications, but if we get the parameter plans, as they're called, loaded up onto the website so that people can have a look at them if they so wish. Maya?
Yeah, I mean we will try and look through the questions which you've very kindly written in on the chat and see whether we've missed anything or whether there's anything else which we can publish on the web which provides that, because we owe you that as a duty. Particularly thanks from me to all my fellow members of the Neighbourhood Plan Group for all the time and commitment which they put into all of this. So thank you all for that, and thank you for joining us this evening.